Okay. So everybody mute yourself until you're called on. Um, uh, we're all so crazy busy, aren't we? It's a very exciting time. And I'll begin with the check-in. Joan, you look beautiful. I tell you, look at her. Her hair is all nice and she's looking so young. And well, at any rate, um, I'm Teresa Elamine, and I'm the Advancing Human Rights Committee chair, and also uh, Fannie Lou Hamer branch organizer. And the one thing we wanted to add to the check-in for this meeting is what is the most pressing human rights thing on your mind right now? And a couple of weeks ago, I could say just Gaza, but I'll have to say war in the MENA region, since Israel has chosen to attack on three fronts: in Lebanon against Hezbollah, which is called the Party of God, and then you got Hamas, and then you got Iran. So that is the most pressing human rights issue on my mind, because it's the genocide that Israel is perpetrating against the Palestinians. So now that there are 8 of us in the meeting, let us go forward. So if we could go with Joan, and then Diane, and then Phyllis, and then Linda, Dr. Linda, and then Edith, then Robin, and then George. So we could remember that order: Joan, Diane, Phyllis, and let's keep going. Thank you, Joan.
Yeah, Joan Goddard in San Jose, California branch. And everything you said, Teresa, of course, is the way I feel too. I was just going to say Gaza, but you're right. It's even getting worse and worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan and Diane.
So yes, all that, but the 95 billion that the Congress just approved for wars in Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan, I think it's just as horrible as anyway. That's really bothering me today.
Oh yeah, money for war. Phyllis, introduce yourself.
I think the bottom line to all of this is racism, and I mean it's the bottom line. Period. I mean, I don't know how you equate that with Ukraine, but that's the thing that I am the most concerned about and have been for some time, and it pervades every aspect of society in the United States and in the world.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go with Dr. Linda, then Edith, then Robin.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Linda Ridley in New York City, hopefully soon to be a New York City branch. What's on my mind is the white supremacy in education that really prohibits us from fully understanding what's going on in the world. We see today, this weekend, with the protests on the Columbia University campus that are being hijacked by provocateurs, the same way it happened 30, 40 years ago. And people are confusing the protests with anti-Semitism, and it's total confusion if you're not educated. But that's what my concern is.
And Edith, can you stop eating to give us your intro? You look like you're enjoying it, you and Robin both. I wish I had something good to eat. Oh, unmute yourself, Linda. We can't hear you. Okay. So begin again.
Okay. I feel it's so hard to choose any one of these things that are so horrible. But I think there's terrible greed, and I cannot understand the motivation for war at all. I cannot understand the individual people who perpetrate it. What do they hope to get? You know, the Gaza thing and all the things right around it are so fearful and, you know, it doesn't affect me right now, but it's part of the whole world. It just could be terrible.
Well, I do want to say that uh, my comrade from SNCC, Phyllis Cunningham, and Edith are both in New York City. And it's just been amazing in recent meetings how the New York City folks are starting to come in because Dr. Linda is also in New York City. So we hope to have a meeting in the next week or so to form an organizing nucleus. So be sure to say where you're from because
Yeah,
Edith,
from New
not
York
everybody
City.
may know you. And so you are in the city, right?
Right.
Uh-huh. And we know Phyllis is also in the city. So Robin, you're next.
Yeah, hi everyone, Robin Lloyd, Burlington, Vermont. I'm like everyone else horrified at the amount of money being spent for weapons, although our representative voted against money for Israel, but yes, money for Ukraine. One bit of good news, I just got off a wonderful 1 hour webinar with a high school. He's a junior in high school, young man who was inspired by Ira Helford about nuclear weapons. He's formed Students for Nuclear Disarmament. He is so eloquent, and he's forming nuclear abolition organizations around the country. And, you know, you can just reach him at, now it's too dark here, but anyway, talk to me and I can give you the contact. I'm going to try to either bring him here to Burlington, Vermont, or get him on an email with some and try to get our youth here involved in this issue of nuclear weapons.
That is so important. George.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm George Friday. I live in Shelby, North Carolina in the Southern Piedmont branch. I am the program chair, and I'm letting Tina Sheldon in. And the human rights issue that is on my mind most today, and yes, Gaza's everywhere, and it's hard, it just every time, there's a lot there. But about a week and a half ago, United for Peace and Justice, who is an employer of mine, held a webinar organized by a past intern, Matt, who lived in Gaza until last summer and then moved to Berlin. Apparently, the repression on dissent in Germany is so extreme. We had journalists on the webinar, students. The students were being threatened to be thrown out of school if they continued protesting. We got word today that indeed one of those speakers in our webinar was indeed thrown out of her school. I'm going to put the recording to the webinar in the chat in case you're interested. And my concern is that young people are at more danger than they've been pretty much in my lifetime, as is this crisis, likely the worst of all of our lifetimes. Pass.
Thank you. And Tina, we're doing a check-in. So it's your name, your branch, your roles, and and what is the one human rights issue that's pressing on your mind today?
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Name, Tina Shelton, outside of Philadelphia in the Greater Philadelphia branch, and I am a newly elected board member of the national section. And the human rights issue right now, obviously in the news, what's happening to our students, as George was saying, but I think the Earth Day and Water Day, the human right to water is mostly on my mind right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Today is Earth Day. And so thank you for reminding us, Tina. Well, Joan, I meant to call you to kind of lean on you on the next agenda item. But George, if you could just help me by putting up the short agenda that we talked about earlier, if you have that handy. Well, that's simple enough. And leaning on you, Joan, on the AHR leadership history. My general concept is probably not phrased correctly, but my general concept was the significance of this issue committee as having leaned towards a racial justice priority. And that kind of fits with what Phyllis was saying about what weighs on her mind. And what seems to be happening worldwide is an attack on non-Europeans. And the UN recognizes this by establishing the UN Decade for People of African Descent. But Joan has been an important part of this history of AHR. And Joan, you've been around longer than me in terms of the leadership. Well, in terms of the leadership of Will, because you were once program committee chair. And my memory of AHR only goes back to Barbara Nielsen. I was in something called the Beloved Community, which involves Sha'an. And I was involved in that kind of racial justice approach, which was kind of like advancing human rights. So if you could help our group by doing a little history of advancing human rights as you know it, because you're our elder person on knowing the most about the origins of the Advancing Human Rights Committee. Could you give us that little history? And if you can do it in under 5 minutes, that would be great.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, I think you and I both have about the same, or at least the same leadership person when Barbara Nielsen was coordinating, having meetings sometimes of a group. And since this is spur of the moment, I don't have all the names, but there's been every year or so changes, and we've been adding the subcommittees or working groups, we're calling them now. And so I'm sorry, I don't have all the details, but it's been kind of alternating different people. At some point, Darian stepped in because it was clear that Barbara was not being able to have lots of people coming to meetings, even though she was sending the information to lots of people. And we had an election, and we elected 3 wonderful co-chairs. And I'm not going to try to say their names, although I probably could. They're wonderful. But as the year went by, it was right at the beginning of COVID, and things kept happening with families and so on. And so at some point they all had to resign, and some of us kind of stepped up as a group, I think. And then we got through another year, but we had, I think, but maybe it was only part of a year. In any case, in 2020, when the election was coming up, we had a very small meeting early in September, and it just seemed like it was better to focus on the election and all the stuff that was going on around it. So we had a hiatus of the AHR committee for some months, and then in the spring, I started, or actually, I was talking with people in December about taking on the leadership, but then the main person I was talking with only wanted to lead the UN group, which is another whole thing that we won't get into right now about why we don't still have the UN group in AHR when we list off the groups that are part of it. But what we ended up with after some delays was that in July of 2021, I guess, we had a meeting where lots of people had lots of ideas about things to work on, and we formed a whole bunch of subcommittees. And we eventually ended up in 6 months or so, we came, some people said they would lead it, and then they said they wouldn't because they were conflicted about conflicts, personal interactions. And then we had a wonderful person for more than a year, Donna Peel from New England, from Cape Cod. I'm remembering more than I thought, I guess, that I thought I could come up with. And I'm sorry if some of it's slightly off, but Donna did that as long as she could. And then she pleaded for someone else last fall to take over. And CC Anderson volunteered 1 month. And then the next month, Teresa volunteered to join her. And that was great to have co-chairs. But then CC found that she needed to drop out as far as chairing. And so, yay, Teresa has carried on. Now, what else should we add, Teresa?
Well, Joan, it is just amazing. You are you and your humility. But the truth of the matter is that Joan and Darian together called for us to kind of restart advancing human rights, as the three co-chairs had to step down. And they were three women of African descent, one from the Detroit branch, Martha Collins from Milwaukee, and Sekou, I think her name was, from the Boston branch of African descent. And I'm not sure if she went back to Africa, but those were the three who had to step down. And so then the hiatus, but Joan did the heavy lifting for well over a year. She brought us together under this concept of what we're now calling working groups, which were kind of subcommittees that we convened. And so we had racial justice, and we had the committees we have now. We didn't have housing, but we had what we were calling UN for Women. And UN for Women, which is a separate issue committee now, because Barbara Nielsen leads that. So when George does the program committee meeting, Barbara's job is to report on the meetings of UN for Women, which I could never figure out, never got to get to one. So we have actually 4 working groups now, and it is in large part due to Joan. And what Joan did, which she refused to call herself the chair, and I just kept saying, Joan, you really are the chair. And Joan was like, no, I'm just convening. And she stayed in that role of convener until we can get to where we are now. And Joan is so modest. Every time I look at Joan, all I think about is pay equity and 9 to 5, because we are 9 to 5ers for life. And Joan is the pay equity queen. That's how I first heard about Joan Goddard, was through 9 to 5 and the work on pay equity in San Jose. So this human rights approach that we're taking, it really spills over into quite a bit. But the 4 real main things: ending mass incarceration and the death penalty. And on that score, Phyllis, we decided that we would start to dismantle the system of solitary confinement. So get ready, Phyllis, because I'm going to call on you about what New York is doing in that regard as we get ready for the New York branch to be back online. And then we have the UN Decade reparations, which I thought we would be going out of business on the UN Decade at the end of this year. But at the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, which just ended a couple of days ago in Geneva, the UN Forum decided a new decade is needed. So the UN Decade on Reparations Working Group will be continuing as the UN Decade beyond the end of this year. And then we have the Border Migration Justice Working Group, which Tina did the heavy lifting on that for quite a while. But we had the most powerful meeting yesterday, Tina. Adrian did his thing. He talked for like 20 minutes or so, and he gave the whole history of the work he's been done as a Chicano on the issue of migration and border and migration justice. And so he's all the way in as the convener now, Tina. He's going to do the work. And so then we have housing justice, which is our newest working group. And in the triangle tomorrow morning, Patrick O'Neill, who is a member of the Triangle branch, is having a major press conference at 9 a.m. because a homeless encampment of tents is being dismantled. And you know, we have this going on in California and everywhere where they're dismantling the homeless, trying to have some kind of housing. Well, that's happening. And so the Catholic Worker House that Patrick is a part of and others have mobilized, and they will risk arrest tomorrow morning. So we may be doing a campaign to get Patrick O'Neill out of jail because he goes to prison all the time for nuclear weapons. And so he just got out of federal prison not too long ago. So he's just a real jailbird for justice. So those are the things that are going on with the 4 working groups. So there's lots of activity around the country. So Phyllis, if you could talk about the important solitary confinement. Joan, you're raising your, Robin, you're raising your hand.
Yep.
Well, you want to go after Phyllis. Yeah,
Whatever.
if you could go after Phyllis, Robin, because we are going branch by branch. So Phyllis is representing the state of New York City branch in formation. And then we'll go to Burlington, Vermont, so that Robin can catch us up. And since we have, George, if you could do the 3-minute timer. So when you've been talking for 2 minutes, Phyllis, George will give you the finger for the 1-minute warning. What happened to Phyllis? Did we lose? Oh, there you are.
Okay, I just want to be perfectly clear. I am not on the central committee for the organization that was, well, it was several organizations working together, but one of the lead organizations was an organization called Halt Solitary Confinement. And there are a couple other organizations that it is related to, but anyway, the Halt Solitary Confinement has been working on, and Edith, you can chip in on this because Edith has been working for years, demonstrating and going to city council meetings and things like that. But finally got a resolution, and it was passed within the last a month in the city. We did get a resolution passed on the state, but it has never been, it was last year, was never enforced. But the new resolution for the city is no one can be held in, I would say, not solitary confinement, but isolation for more than 4 hours. And then after the 4 hours, when people can cool down, then they should be appropriately treated, because many people that are incarcerated in New York City, and that goes throughout the entire country, are people who have mental health problems, and they need mental health treatment and not to be, locked away for days and months on end. So anyway, but the problem is we have to work now to get it enforced, because there's all kinds of, shenanigans that go on in terms of what the Bureau of Prisons decides what solitary confinement is, et cetera. But anyway, and I just became aware of, and I got an email today on a group which is national. It's called Out of the Box. And it's a number of states that are working on solitary confinement. And the group here in New York is acting as a consultant to those groups. And those groups people are coming and meeting on Zoom, but also meeting in person from different states to find out how they can, get bills passed that address solitary confinement. But
Thank
there
you,
are another.
Phyllis. George, are you there? I'm not good at keeping time, but I'm thinking Phyllis may be at her 3 minutes.
She absolutely is. I thought I had
Okay,
turned on my
great.
camera and put up my finger, but
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
That's okay.
All right.
That's
just
okay.
now though.
Because George, please be on top of the timekeeping. We need you.
Oh, see, I didn't
So
even
Robin
notice.
Lloyd is next, and then
Okay.
Diane Blake.
Sorry.
Because Diane Blake is the person who brought this priority to us at the beginning of, seems like it was it this year? Was it last year? But
Yeah.
to focus on solitary confinement, ending it and ending the death penalty as priorities for the ending mass incarceration and the death penalty work. So now Robin 3 minutes and then Diane 3 minutes. And then we'll keep
Hey,
going
I had my
around.
hand up way back when Joan Goddard was speaking. I just wanted to add a bit to the history of advancing human rights during the time of Laura Roscos. She was an excellent leader on that issue. For example, she worked hard with the rights of the child. She got us activated in WILF to petition the United Nations to, I guess, get the United States up to speed about caring about that issue. And so that was before 2014, I guess. So that was before the events that Joan was talking about. The question I have in terms of the immigration and is it called Immigration and Border Control? I think
It's called Border Migration Justice Working Group. We call it the BMJ. The BMJ
I
Working
think
Group.
it's a very important issue group, and I'm wondering, has WILF actually issued a kind of a statement, because all the politicians are rambling on and talking absurd talk about the border. Does WILF have a statement that can be prepared and be out there during these months leading up to the election?
Well, let's I guess the sense I'm getting is people want to have discussion point by point. And since Robin didn't do 3 minutes, Tina, your hand was raised because you did the heavy lifting on BMJ for a while. So what's your comment?
I was just going to say, I did write an article for the upcoming Peace and Freedom, and I did not find, although it's possible I didn't find it, I did not find a statement from WILF US, but I did find a statement from International WILF on borders and migration. So there's that. But I might have to go back and do another search to be definitive, Robin. But if we have made a statement, I would say it's not in the last 3 years.
Well, we
Wilf,
should make one in
Wilf US,
preparation
yes.
for this.
So,
Well,
For this.
well, one of the things we'll talk about is respecting the leadership of the person who is now Chicano, Adrienne Bernal, who is now the leader of the working group. And he is going to be doing an excellent job. I've known him for many, many, many years, and he is an expert on this issue. And when you listen to the recording from yesterday, you will see what an expert he is. So, in the usual fashion of avoiding bureaucratic tendencies, this is a bottom-up organizing approach for advancing human rights, which is why we established the working groups, and we're very focused on community organizing, not reaching out to the politicians who vote $95 million for the war machine and nothing for human needs, and they can't get a migration policy together. So we're not depending on the grass tops. We're working from the bottom up. So Diane Blay, if you could speak, please.
But I think we ought to issue something on migration. I don't know.
Well, this is not, oh, please, I was about to say something that probably would be perceived as ugly, but it's not so much what you think should happen, Robin Lloyd. We have a border migration justice working group that's being led by Adrian. So I say the meetings are every third Sunday at 5 p.m. And you should relate to Adrian on that because he is the leader of the working group. This umbrella meeting is not where those decisions are made. And there were 10 people in that meeting yesterday. So I say that's going to be a strong interest working group. So if you can participate in the working group and respect the leadership of Chicano, which is how he identifies, Adrienne Bernal. So could we hear from you, Diane?
Well, you could, but I don't have much to say because I've been so busy with so many different things. And so if you want a report of what's going on in Virginia, I am so not into Virginia politics right now. I'm more into international stuff. So
I think, Diane, you can say whatever you want to say because the Jane Addams third Wednesday meetings, they rock. And it was such a powerful meeting with the CSW. And it was like that report back. And then, what you've done with the Jane Addams branch, if you could just say a little about how that concept came to be, that you open up the meetings so that it's like we have like a full membership meeting opportunity every time the Jane Addams branch convenes on the third Wednesday. Could you just say how that came to be?
Well, it came to be because it's something that I think is needed, and the one Wolf calls had ended basically. So we need something to organize to get everyone involved and feel part of Wolf, I think. So I thought this was a way to do it. And next month we're going to have in May we're going to have Mary Hanson Harrison talk about Jane Addams. She's really studied a lot about this figure that we all kind of, I think, emulate. So I think it's a great way because we have the leaders can speak out, all the issue committee chairs, and people can ask questions. So I think it's just something that's really needed in any organization. It's like a plenary every month.
Yeah, it's a beautiful vision and it's working. So if we could go to Tina of the Greater Philadelphia branch, because being in the branch on August 9th of 2023 and seeing the relationships from the Greater Philadelphia branch with the UU folks, I believe it was the UU folks that hosted the meeting,
It was
or was
Chester.
it the Quakers?
Yeah, with Quakers. Yep.
Oh,
Chestnut Hill
okay.
Quakers.
So if you could say what's going on across the board with our working groups advancing human rights, particularly on the question of reparations, because that's what stood out to me in Greater Philadelphia.
Yes, there have been there's a study group being created by uh, in Cobra of Philadelphia, and we are in touch with him. I'm about to be reaching back out. There's been a couple articles in the newspaper about his working group, and then in immigration, continuing to work with the two big issues here are driving PA forward, getting driver's licenses, and then halting medical deportations. So there's some activity ramping up on that, led by MILPA and some of the other immigration organizations.
Wow. And so, George, if you could give us a bit about what's happening in North Carolina on all the fronts, because North Carolina, one of my favorite states, I spent 12 years there, and I lived in the People's Republic of Durham, where you can get anything passed. They pass the reparations, they pass a resolution, a moratorium on the death penalty, et cetera, et cetera. So my favorite place, Durham, North Carolina. But could you say what's happening in North Carolina, George?
There are statewide groups that are working on death penalty, solitary confinement, and a study group around reparations in the Charlotte area. As you said, Durham has already passed support for reparations, as has Asheville. Greensboro and Charlotte are the next two places that are likely to have something introduced to their city or county bodies for vote. And those will probably happen this year. In the Charlotte area, the group is called Reimagining America that's taken this on. They've done the studies like other cities have done, and now they're at the point where they're doing public forums on, what do people think, what form should these reparations take? In Asheville, they're taking the form of support for businesses and housing. In Durham, they're taking the form of support for communities, housing, and public spaces like parks and monuments. So that's what I know about North Carolina. It's not everything, but it's what I know.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. And so, George, please time me on Georgia for the 3 minutes.
Mhm.
What we've been doing, basically, through the relationships of members of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, and also the collaboration between the branch and the Southern Anti-Racism Network. SARN, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. So we're using this space to press forward on reparations, which we've been doing since 2014, when Ta-Nehisi Coates put out the article, A Case for Reparations, in the Atlantic magazine. And we've been committed for this decade to reparations as a grassroots nonprofit, for lack of a better description. But our partnerships are with the Southern Center for Human Rights, which is Walisha Wilson, who was a member in the Metro Atlanta branch. And she's since moved far north, but she still connects with the Fannie Lou Hamer branch in Metro Atlanta. And so her job nonprofit, is working on solitary confinement to dismantle it in the state of Georgia. So they have a lawsuit against the Department of Corrections in the state of Georgia. And on the question of reparations, the Fannie Lou Hamer branch has set a strategic plan in motion based on the bicentennial of Columbus, Georgia, founded in 1828. It was literally a slave holding city at its founding. They sold slaves, the city sold slaves at the corner of Broadway and 12th Street. It's a history that we hope to get our reparations for in 2028. So it's a 5-year plan that we started in 2023. And I'm glad to know that the UN decade will continue into the next decade because we can still build on that and the resolution that was passed at Wolf International to talk about. So with my 1 minute remaining, I would say on housing justice, that will be the focus of the reparations ordinance because the evictions are off the chart in Muskogee County. Unbelievable. And I know that evictions are off the chart in other places. And I was shocked to hear that Vermont is one of the most homeless places in the country in terms of housing insecurity. So there's much to be done. So now we'll go to Dr. Linda and we'll see if Joan has anything to add about the wonderful state of California, which has a lot going on. If California leads the way, we can all jump on board. So Dr. Linda and then Joan.
This is Dr. Linda. I can't add anything to the discussion. I'm looking forward to the conversations we're going to be having. I shared what I've been observing with the protests currently with the funding with Israel, the challenges in terms of recognizing the Palestinian concerns. I've been doing quite a bit of work and been absorbed with intercultural competencies among groups to try to get them up to speed. I'm sure Sister George can recognize the challenges there. And I even appreciate, Sister Theresa, you mentioned how we are here in education. We spend a lot of time just trying to get people up to speed in terms of what they should know. And we're continually appalled at people are not reading, they're not taking advantage of the material that's out here to educate them. And so it's left to the rest of us to try to, if I may say so, push it down their throat. For want of a better way to say it. But Sister Tina, I'm glad to hear that NCOBRA is active in Philadelphia. I am actually from Philadelphia, so I'm familiar with a lot of that activity. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to us getting some traction around New York City, and hopefully I'll have a little more substance to add as we go forward.
Well, what happened at Columbia is kind of key. So I'll let Joan speak. And then we'll talk about the importance of the young people rising up. Because Phyllis, you remember when we were young and we were in SNCC, I was 17 when the bug bit me. And so it made me who I am today. So it's the young people we got to keep recruiting, Thank you, Joan. What's happening in California?
Okay. I do not have a report. I was coming into this meeting to learn, and that's what I'm doing. And so I do not have anything prepared about what's happening in the different subject areas that we have the working groups in AHR. I'm sorry. And I'll look forward to hearing the rest of the discussion. I know we're getting close to the hour, so it's probably just as well I don't have a big long report.
Well, I do want to say that the state of California has a comprehensive reparations package that it's been putting together. And it's kind of the devolution is down city by city, county by county. So San Francisco has come up with something where they were talking about giving millions of dollars to people. But the one thing that we should know, this concept of a guaranteed monthly income is taking off everywhere. So it's an attack on poverty, but it's also a kind of reparations. So there are two cities in the great state of Texas that have passed guaranteed monthly incomes. So I think it's Houston in Harris County, and now I believe it's the capital city of Austin. So they're talking about giving $1,000 a month. And so there's a certain criteria. So the concept of a guaranteed monthly income is important, especially for women. Pay equity. So how can we make sure that the women who take care of the children are not living in poverty because they can't afford to work and pay child care and take care of their families? So the concept of a guaranteed monthly income is important. So we are getting close to the hour. So time check, Joan. I don't know why my clock doesn't work.
I just wanted to say, good. I'm glad you brought up the state reparations. There is a big project, a big report, and they do have a plan now where they're putting some things out for the legislature to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, that's big time in California, and everybody's watching California because what people really want is state by state, but we're not there yet in Georgia, and we're a long way from getting there, frankly. George, I was saying Joan, but I meant George. What's the time check?
We have 8 minutes left before we're at 9 o'clock. 8 minutes.
Oh, well, that's good. That's a lot of time, actually. So let's kind of open it up. Robin, you're unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to add to the conversation since you didn't talk much about Vermont?
Yeah, no, I said what I wanted to say, my interest in, I missed the meeting on migration, but feeling it's very relevant to the election. And we have a very strong Free Her Vermont group here. Several Wilk people went to that, and that's because the state legislature wants to build a new prison for women. And of course, we only have 200 women, and only 6 of them are dangers to the community, really. So we're doing the work there.
Well, there was someone in the meeting from I think it was in the housing justice meeting, and she was from Vermont, or maybe she was from Women, Money, and Democracy committee, and she's in the Burlington branch. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I think you're talking about Jean Hopkins.
Yes, exactly. So Jean Hopkins knows about the homeless
Yes.
and the housing crisis.
Yes.
And I was shocked to hear that the most unhoused people per capita are in Oregon, and then Vermont is the second state. I was shocked to hear that because I always think of Vermont as this beautiful place where lots of wealthy people live, kind of like Connecticut. But to hear that about Vermont was rather shocking. But I'm glad that Jean Hopkins is now part of the Housing Justice Working Group coming through Women, Money, and Democracy. So our working groups are really getting to be in good shape. And part of the history that I hope we can make as an Advancing Human Rights Committee, we do have an upcoming election where we're trying to fill all the seats on the board. And Diane Blay and I were just chatting about there really kind of possibly 6 openings on the national board. So in order to run, you have to have 2 years of membership. So I said to the nominations chair, Ellen Schwartz, look to the branches and find the leaders in the branches and get them to run, because we could have the potential of 2 co-presidents. So that's 2 people for that office. Then we got the nominations committee, we got the membership development committee, we got the at-large seat that Philip Cole currently holds, and we have a program committee chair. So those are all of the openings that I know of. George, did I miss anything?
I don't believe so. I heard
So
everybody.
that's a possibility of 6 positions. And you know how hard we have to work to help the nominations committee. It was a great job done by the nominations committee on this past round, led by George. And so we were able to fill several seats. So we got 2 development co-chairs, Martha Collins, Mary Beth Gardam. We got a personnel committee chair, which that position has been vacant for so long, filled by Cece Anderson out of Metro Atlanta. So we are in a position now to have the full, I think what should be 12 to 13 member board, a fully staffed board going into 2025. And that is the aim. So George, if you could kind of give us the last words on what you know about the Triannual Congress, and then we'll make sure we're clear about when our May meeting is. So
Okay.
Tell us, George, what's happening with the Triannual?
There is a planning meeting on Thursday. That information went out about today. There has been a speaker added. There was some back and forth about it, but that speaker is Kim Poole. So because she's representing AHR, there's not an issue. The issue on Thursday will be if people who are volunteering, like on the planning committee, or speaking, like Kim Poole and Tamara Lorenz, do they have to pay to register? The decision will be no. And that's all I know.
Well, Tina, I'm going to reach out to you now because I'm a bit stunned because Kim Poole and I were going to present for the Advancing Human Rights Committee on Water is Life. And so that's supposed to be on Sunday as a workshop. So what is this role that Kim Poole is now playing in addition to that?
It's
the
not.
same
It's the
thing.
same thing. It's somebody thought that it was a new thing, but it's still the AHR thing. That's what she's doing.
Oh, okay. Is there anything else you want to add about highlights? Because when I got that postcard in the mail, I was knocked off my feet. That
It's
really
beautiful,
looks
wasn't it?
good.
Yeah.
It's going to help us recruit new members if we can get people to come. So the $55 special fee, which I'm going to be paying mine on May 1 when I get my pension money.
Up
And so
until
is
May
that
15th.
for anybody who wants to come, or is strictly for WILF members?
It's only for WILF members, only for WILF members. And so you would have to renew to get that rate. But all of us that are already members, even new members like Dr. Ridley, can get that rate up until May 15th. Mm-hmm.
Well, is the Triannual open to non-members in any way?
Yes, it is. So the non-member rate is $75, or you can just pay by the day. Either a member or non-member can also pay by the day. So I think it's $20 on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, $30 on Saturday, $30 on Sunday.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because I think some members of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch might be willing to come. Well, actually, these are not members. The way the Fannie Lou Hamer branch works is we have a membership core of at least 10, but we have a base that's much bigger where people are trying to decide if they want to join the branch. So I'm going to ask people to come on to make sure they see the Sunday closing, because I'm hoping, in addition to The Water is Life with me and Kim Poole, which Kim Poole will be the star of that presentation. And so I'll be talking about the U.S. problems,
Okay.
drawing on Flint, the situation in Flint, the situation in Detroit, the situation in Chicago with the lead in the water, and all of the water fights around the rivers in the U.S. South. Because we just ended a big fight, the state of Georgia with Florida, about the use of a river. And so if you got a river, you got water.
Yeah.
That's the thinking, which is why Detroit will come back, because of the Detroit River. So at any rate.
And also, Oriole Osprey Lake is going to be a wonderful speaker starting off Sunday. Sorry, I think, well, it'll be Timon Wallace and then her. Like forgetting, like at 1 p.m. I think. Anyway, Sunday's going to be fantastic. It would be I think the best day to invite non-members, but Saturday's going to be great too. With some really great speakers, especially on Palestine. So it's going to be a good Congress. You're gonna you're gonna wish you were in person, because it's going to be we're trying to build in some breaks, but it's going to be almost nonstop. So fortify yourself. But of course, it'll be on the WILF webpage after, if you have other obligations, or you have a meeting.
Okay. Well, Linda is just reminding me we all have a hard stop at 9.
Yep,
So
me too.
let Diane Blay have the last word. It's 9:02. So let Diane Blay have the last word before we confirm our 4th Monday, May meeting. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that on the front page of the Washington Post today was information about the flotilla that's sailing out of Turkey for Gaza. And it will be very interesting to see what happens with this flotilla, with these boats that Ann Wright is basically one of the leaders of. So I just wanted so you all can keep watching about that, because it has met with disaster before. It'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Well, our next meeting will be 2 days before the Congress starts, which will be May 27th, which I do believe may be Memorial Day. Does anybody have a problem with meeting on May 27th,
Yep.
Memorial Day?
Yes.
You do, Diane?
Yes, I'm unable to meet then.
Well, could we move the meeting to May 20th? I will likely be in Cleveland, Ohio, because, and I can tell you about what I'll be doing in Cleveland, Ohio. So could we move the meeting up a week to May 20th, which will be the 3rd Monday? Does that work for everyone?
Well, that doesn't work for me either, because I'm going to the May Day for Money in Chicago, but I mean, hopefully everybody else. So whatever you want.
Okay, well, let's do, because Memorial Day is a lot of vacation stuff, graduations, people getting out of school. So if it's okay, we'll move it to the 3rd Monday in May, because that'll be a good solid 10 days before the triannual, and we can make sure we're really straight about what AHR is doing at the triannual and who we're inviting. So thank you so much for, I think, a productive meeting, and I will see you at the board meeting, some of you, which I understand is this Saturday at 1 p.m. And I'm having a big yard sale, so hopefully I'll be sold out by 1 p.m. And because people gonna be lining up at 7 and for 8 o'clock start. So I'm prepared to I've been really advertising it, so I'm prepared to make a bunch of money Saturday. So good night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, George.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
George, you'll save the recording in the chat and send it out, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.